And considering him this
Mm-hmm.
week personally.
Yeah, just listening to like the interviews and stuff. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, maybe early this morning. Either way, I seen his first interview. It actually was quite revealing. Listening to his interviews at the Masters, comparing the two, he sounds much more confident mentally. He sounds much more confident in like his, the strength of his back and how he's adjusted. Probably using the Masters more to figure out, what he can do and kind of not exactly where his ceiling or where his 100% is his new 100% is going to be, but just kind of feeling things out. So seeing him make the cut there was great. Now he's had 5.5, 6 weeks or so to prepare for this event. I think he maybe doesn't have he always has a shot to win. His around the green game's been good. If he gets on a roll, I think he can win. I'm more looking at like a top 20 bet. I've seen him around like plus 350, plus 400 in some spots. I really like that. I think I'm probably going to chase that instead. I'm going to get some exposure in DFS, but just excited to see him back here again. He's probably not going to play much outside of the four majors, the WGCs possibly, stuff like that. But awesome to see Tiger in the field. It's going to make it even funner to watch. And we'll jump into the course now. Actually, before we do that, if you're new to our show, you're new to our Patreon, you can head over to patreon.com/JagerBombs, get your PGA package for $10 a month. That's going to give you access to our cheat sheet, DFS rankings, top bets. The sheet has a customizable model. We've got, if you go over on our YouTube channel to our other videos, you can find tutorials to that as well. And if you play more than one sport, if you're into MLB, maybe soccer, Dane covers soccer and tennis as well, absolutely crushes those niche sports. So we have sheets for those as well. So if you play multiple sports for $20 a month American, you can get our full package, which gives you access to all of our sports, our Discord, all the special channels for news and everything else. You can also get a free trial. I'm going to drop that link here shortly into the chat. You can come in and give us a free trial into our Discord. Limited information, content, and stuff in there as well. But you have access to all of our coaches. You have access to our betting channel, as well as our, our limited trial content as well. So reach out to us if you jump in there. Without further ado, let's just jump right in. I guess the first thing we should probably talk about, it's probably the biggest narrative right now that I can see, at least, scouring the internet here, is the weather. And I'm just going to bring that up here if I can maneuver my mouse in time. So this is Thursday and Friday weather. My first take was looking at tee times. They're going to be, I think, local time 7 a.m. is the first one. I don't think it's 6. I think it's 7 a.m. is those first ones. So Friday morning is going to be just absolute hell out there. Almost 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts. Thursday is pretty much this. Thursday morning still has some wind gusts in that time, but it's nothing like Friday morning. I think there's a slight advantage to like an AM, PM. That's kind of what everyone's talking about. Now, before I ask you your opinion, I just want to share that I'm not building all of my lineups based on one narrative. I'm not the all-in on one narrative kind of guy. If I'm building a 20 max, probably what I would do is maybe have a full stack of, the AM, PM wave in 4 lineups. Or 5, something like that, somewhere in that 20 to 25% range. And then kind of build like, half AM, PM, and then the guys that I really like in the other wave in some lineups, maybe go the other way in case the weather does change. It's all about, for me, giving yourself multiple chances with multiple narratives, I think, if you're multi-entering that way, because it's not knowing exactly what's going to happen, because no one really knows what's going to happen, especially with weather. It's about setting yourself up for, if the weather does turn out to be a huge advantage in that wave, that you now have lineups built to not only cash, but to possibly take down a GPP. So with that long, take a breath now, and I will let you, I want to hear your take on the weather.
Yeah, initially, I think this forecast has even changed from what I saw earlier today. I was leaning much more toward going kind of the full AM, PM stack, but I am, backing off that a little bit. If you look at, like, you're seeing the gusts tomorrow morning, you're still going to be 35 there for a couple of hours. Not too bad in the afternoon, but like you said, Friday is going to be brutal for all those guys that are in the morning wave. But still, over 20-mile-an-hour gusts in the afternoon too. So initially, I was looking at kind of getting rid of almost all the guys, especially the mid-range and lower guys in the PM wave to start tomorrow. When you talk about the top end, I think like Scotty and Rahm and some of those guys, if you wanted to play those, they can definitely still battle through this wind. I know, 40-mile-an-hour wind is different, though. When you're getting gusts of almost 50 mile an hour, that's just absurd.
It can
so
crazy.
I think I still will factor it in for the lower end, but looking at the top end guys, I still think I'll still consider guys like Scotty and Rahm and some of those that you're going to see much more ownership push on to Rory and Spieth and mostly those two, I guess, over 9,500 for sure. I think they are honestly probably the best plays though, but Scotty's got to be right there with them.
And for anyone that's new on the sheet here, I also have tee times for round one as well as these waves. And I put the AM PM because I do have a slight lean to that. Like, I'm with you totally in that my perspective had changed even from this morning. Just seeing that there is going to be gusts early tomorrow morning as well with the differential in the afternoon. Like, afternoon scoring looks like it could be, maybe a stroke and a half lower than in the morning. So I guess the biggest takeaway out of all this weather for me isn't so much the full tournament anymore. It's more showdowns. So if you're playing showdowns on Thursday and Friday, it's definitely going to be leaning towards the afternoon and the later tee times as possible. So it's kind of going to give you exposure to that stack, that weather stack, the entire field almost, because they're going to split each day. So that's kind of my overall take right now. If it's more going to come down to, if I'm deciding between two players for a final spot in my lineup, one's kind of got the AM PM and the other one doesn't, I may give a slight lean if I'm looking for that final box to check, but it's definitely not driving a high percentage of my lineups towards that stack. I'm definitely going to build a couple of stacks that are going to be full AM PM and a couple that are, let's say 3 that are AM PM and 2 that are PM AM, and then that's only going to make up maybe like 15%, 20% of my overall lineups, just because I do want to cover those, because it does look like weather is going to be a factor here at this course, which is going to play very hard to begin with. Now, one thing with this course,
I think you've really got to push your decision even as late as you can tonight, because it could flip again, and if those gusts tomorrow morning drop down into the 20s even, I think that even changes my thoughts on that. I would want to go much heavier on the AM PM again.
Yep, I'm with you there. Yep, definitely leave it as late as possible. What is tee off time? So local there is 7. Yeah, it's early. I'm probably going to be just waking up as they tee off. So I'm going to try and stay up as late as possible tonight. I'll be doing MLB articles anyway. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be checking that. I'll be in chat if something changes other than that for now. But for now, if you're playing showdown round 1, round 2, definitely looking at the afternoon guys as an advantage, and then only a slight advantage right now for the AM PM guys on the sheet. So you mentioned, I want to talk about the course a little bit before we talk about these top plays. A couple of things that have changed since 2007 event. What they did was they widened the fairways from about 26, 28 feet is what we saw back in 2007. Very thick, gnarly Bermuda rough. Bent grass greens, but Bermuda rough. They've widened those fairways out to about 40 to 45 feet now. So there is a little bit more landing room. So I don't think it's going to be, we're going to see a few more drivers. I think at the time, and some of those rounds in 2007, guys were only using like 4 or 5 drivers around. We're probably going to see a little bit more of that here this week. But the big change for me in reading through things is the change in the greens. There was a lot of collection areas on the greens. What they did was they went, Gil Hance, I believe, was the guy who restructured it, renovated it, stripped off all around the greens, almost all the greens, I believe, shaved off all the edges so that it kind of rolls. I think of Augusta being fast bent grass greens that roll off the green rather than stick on the greens. And listening to player interviews over the last couple of days, one thing that is clear and been talked about a ton is around the green and scrambling, because the greens are a little bit smaller, and with them having these shaved off edges now, the ball's not going to hold in the greens. There's going to be a lot of chips around the green, as well as a lot of guys were talking about, specifically the grains of the green, and how if you're missing, you want to miss short of the greens, just the way the grain is going, you're going to want to chip into the pins that way. So if these guys are getting beyond the greens, chipping back onto the green and being able to hold it is going to be very, very hard. Par is going to be a good score. These first 2 days of par is like, I don't know what the low score of the round maybe, oh geez, I don't know. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say 66. That should be 4 under is probably going to be close. We may see some 65s with this win. Maybe the guys in the afternoon jump up there, but that's kind of what I'm looking at here. So this course has changed a little bit, but same as any major, around the green is always important. They always set the majors up to be difficult scoring, and difficult scoring usually equals not hitting a lot of greens and having to scramble a lot. So you pretty much need an all-around game. Specifically, though, I guess boosted in my models this week are approach shots. Going to be very important. The guys that can hold the green and give themselves more birdie putts. And then also you're going to around the green would be the other one that I'm looking at. And then specifically with that approach shots, I'm looking at the long irons. Probably going to be quite a large amount, above average amount of shots from that 175 to 200 plus yard range. So I'm looking at guys with good long irons as well. Anything specific you're looking at in your models?
I think it's very similar. Like you said, going to be a very tough test for sure. So you're going to just need all-around game. I like reading about some of these things that say the runoffs around these greens are going to be so far that they're going back, 20, 30 yards away or something. In some cases, it's just could be wild stuff with this wind for sure.
It's going to be. I'm very excited to get going, just because we don't really know what's going to happen. It seems like a lot, and the majority of people, the stuff that you read, either Twitter articles, videos, anything, is we're all, it seems like, kind of looking towards the same thing, like the weather narrative, like I talked about. The around the green has been huge, something that's been talked about a ton. So who really knows when you come to these courses, and these majors are a little bit different than the Masters in that we get a different course all the time, and it's not always a familiar course. So kind of moving into the picks here, which I'll transition right into that. We do have some narratives this week, some guys that played Oklahoma State. Taylor Gooch is one. It's kind of a home game. I think he's the closest in terms of proximity, grew up in the area about 100 miles away from the course. I believe, was it Justin Thomas was another one, OK State. So there's a few guys in the field that have ties there, but I think you nailed it with the top tier, seeing as we're diving in here, especially with the narratives that have been talked about recently. Rory McIlroy and Jordan Spieth are probably, in my estimation, top two highest owned golfers. Their prices a little bit lower from these top guys. They have that wave advantage. Spieth is going for the career Grand Slam. He's playing very well coming in. He's been pretty darn good in the majors, top fives in 2 of his last 5 here as well. Rory is coming in hot. What are your thoughts on those two? Are you playing a lot of those two, or is this a spot that you're maybe going to fade because they're going to be high on? What do you think there?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think I like them the most. So I don't know how I can. I'll just have to get different somewhere else. Other than that, really above 9K. Scotty, I think at the very top is the only one that I'm considering above Rory. I think he can definitely get through the cut. He's got ties here for sure. Other than that, the other AM guys, Hovland and Cam Smith, I like Cam Smith a little more than Hovland. You mentioned kind of that around the green. So I think Cam Smith makes some sense. I don't know how highly owned he'll get, honestly. So I think he can come in a little lower than he usually does in something like this. Xander, I think, makes a lot of sense. Just below them at 9,300. Hideki, have you been seeing something about his back popping up? I'm not. I heard that on something, but if that's the case, then I'm completely off of him again. I'm not messing with that.
He's number 1 in tags on FanShare, so looking to be 20% plus in ownership too. So if there's any concern whatsoever of injury, that's definitely something that I would fade in an elite field when we have tons of other options.
Yeah, we need to check that into that more for sure. So we'll update.
I'll search here while you're going through a few more picks.
Yeah. The other one I really wanted to play Brooks at 9,000. Now he's in that afternoon wave. I think he's going to be like super low on. He could push like 2 or 3%. I think is possible, especially in like the single entry stuff. So if you want to take a shot on a guy, or you think that the waves are not as big of a deal as they are with the wind, I think Brooks is a very good leverage play. he gears up for stuff like this, in my opinion. I'll let you talk about that range before I dip into the 8s.
I haven't seen anything. I'm just searching here on Twitter right now, and I don't see anything on Hideki. I see people betting him and liking him for the outright market. So absolutely nothing in terms of injury at all am I seeing here. And usually Twitter's, you can find something. I just put in like Matsuyama back. I searched Hideki back, Hideki Matsuyama back. Didn't not seeing anything there. So, but back to this top range here. I'm just looking at fan share here, and I've got this sorted by price. So we've got Scotty Scheffler's going to be fairly popular, I think, although the projected ownership right now is only around 15%. And if that's the case, that's kind of similar to what we've seen at the Masters. So I definitely like being overweight on him again, being the most expensive in the field. I think gets people off because the options with Rory and Spieth. I'm going to have a lot of lineups that are going to start with Rory and Spieth. I'm betting them both outright. It's just a nice balanced way to start your lineups. You don't really have to go down in that range, but which we'll talk about here in a minute. I love the sub 7K range here this week. There's a ton of plays that I like. I got like 5 or 6, I think, in my rankings. Plus, I think in total, there's about 10 that I really, really like down in that range. So I have no problem if Scotty Scheffler is going to be, let's say, 8th to 10th, 8th to 12th in ownership this week overall, being overweight. If he's going to be 15%, I have no problem having 20, 30% ownership or exposure to him in my lineups. I've kind of got him over Rahm. Now, back to the narratives here. Oops. Of course. Let's try and log back in here. Back to the narrative street here for a second in terms of so I put together this custom model here just for the show, looking at strokes gained tee to green last 24 rounds. The strokes gained total here, this is strokes gained total on difficult scoring conditions last 24 rounds, strokes gained approach overall, and then strokes gained around the green, and then strokes gained total again last 24 rounds in the wind, and just kind of comparing that little bit of a narrative here. And one thing that just stands out so much here is Rahm, Morikawa, Hovland, Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, Shane Lowry, just their rankings in around the green over the last 24 rounds. And that doesn't mean I'm going to talk anyone off of them. It's just my decision-making process and looking at the boxes, checking all the boxes for around the green. It's kind of just leans me Scheffler over Rahm, leans me Thomas over Morikawa and Rahm, McIlroy and Spieth again over Hovland. It's not something where I'm just completely Xing those guys. Hovland is another one that is the okay state there. So it's not that I'm Xing them. It's that my player pool is very, very small, 15 for 20 max, 15 players right now. I'm trying to keep it at that 15 for my 20 lineups. Very, very tight this week. So that's where my decision-making process came in. As you can see, all these top players are pretty darn good in terms of wind. Like Hovland would be the worst here. Koepka down here struggled a little bit in windy conditions as well recently, but that's kind of the way I'm looking at the top tier. So it's McIlroy and Spieth. I'm going to get Scheffler in there as well. That's kind of my core. And that's kind of it in, I'd say, the 9K and up range. That's the concentration of that, and then some Justin Thomas, I guess, would be my 4th. I knew I had a 4th in there somewhere. But in terms of amount of exposure, it's probably going to go Spieth, McIlroy, Scheffler, and then Thomas in that top range. How are you feeling in that next range?
It's loaded. So I guess right at the top of it, Zalatoris just absolutely murdered me and a lot of people last week. But I don't know how you don't go right back to him right here. I understand I don't even know what his around the green stats are recently, but as far as just pure ball striking, I don't know how you don't go back to him now. Right here, coming off, maybe you get some lower ownership. Not 100% sure what that's looking like either. But you got that up there. If he can have one of those Farmer Genesis around the green weeks, and maybe it's just so hard around the green that everybody kind of evens out a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I think you could definitely go to him, bouncing back from that miscut last week. Really, other than that, dipping down, it's the very bottom of the 8K range for me. Tiger, Hatton, I think both of those would be my next favorites. Lowry would be my favorite after that.
Awesome. Yeah, I mentioned Lowry, just been a beast at the majors. He's made 11 straight cuts at the majors, including that win at the 2019 Open, with 4 top 10s and 7 top 25s in there. I'm not concerned. He's one guy I'm not concerned about the weather at all. Not even looking at the weather split. He is one of the best, win players out there. A beast at the majors, and then he comes in red hot as well with finishes of T3, T3, T12, T13, and T2 in his last 5 events, going back to the Honda in February. So he's most definitely a core play for me this week. And then scrolling down a little bit more, your boy Jaco, I am in on him. He has been very good. Some terrific golf in 2022. He's made 6 of 7 cuts, including a win, 2 top 10s, 5 top 25s, and he ranks 8th in this field in strokes gained tee to green, 4th around the green, and 7th in par 4 scoring, 6th in birdie or better percentage over the last 24 rounds. That really stands out to me. And then kind of dipping down into that 7K range. So those are the 2 guys I'll have the most exposure to in that range. Coming down into the 7K range, 2 guys here, and I want your opinion on them. After I kind of go over, I'm favoring Fitzpatrick a little bit. I know Tony Finau has the advantage in terms of the wind wave, but we talked about that maybe not being as important anymore. We're going to have to keep an eye on that. Finau has back-to-back top 10s in PGA Championships over the last 2 years. Pretty solid in majors here, going back to the start of 2020. And then I wanted to look at his, I'm supposed to have this up, but I don't. So he's below average in terms of wind and difficult scoring. But like I said, he's been good in the majors, been good at the PGA Championships. And then if we look at kind of what his stats have been like recently, very interesting with Mexico, gained 8.2 strokes on approach, finished with a T2, lost 2 strokes putting. That was kind of his difference that week. Comes to the Wells Fargo, crushes it off the tee, but loses almost those same 8 strokes on approach. But one thing that stands out to me during those 2 that I think can carry over into this week is that around the green game. He gained 3+ strokes around the green in both of those events. So I do like Tony here. But I also like Matt Fitzpatrick. He's one of the top players in the field in terms of around the green game. T25 at the PGA Championship last year, and he's coming in with some very solid, like for that price of $7,900, that is a very solid floor. 14th, 26th, T55, T23, 34, and 46th, going back to the Masters in 2020. So really like that there with those 2. Do you lean one way or the other? Do you have anyone else in that high 7, mid 7K range you like?
If I had to pick one of those 2, I would definitely go Finau. Probably more so one of those tiebreaker things with the wave advantage. Other than that, in the top range, I'm not really keen on anybody other than Fleetwood, who I really liked, especially before this weather deal. But Cam Young, I think, could be a guy that really gets some push up with this. If people start going much heavier on the AM, he was already going to be popular. So now if he gets some push up again, it's unfortunate because it's a guy that I actually like. So now that he's going to push much higher ownership, it scares me a little bit. I'll save the low 7K range because I think there's a lot of interesting guys down there. I'll touch on my favorite, and then I'll let you touch on the rest of it. But Gary Woodland is definitely my favorite play in this set overall 7K range down there. Gets the AM. He's been a guy that's came around a little bit recently. Another guy that burned everybody last time out, but had been turning things around this year, getting back into some of that form we saw a couple years ago. Gets the good wave, like I said. So I think 7,300 is a very, very fair price for Gary.
No, I definitely like that. I went down a little bit further. This is a range I don't have a whole bunch to. I talked about Taylor Gooch. He's going to be GPP only for me. Patrick Reed, Russell Henley. I like both of them. I like Henley a little bit more than Reed. So does the model. They got model has him at 24th. Good around the green, just like a solid floor guy. I don't see him, doing much more than like a top 25 is kind of his ceiling. Patrick Reed is kind of a boomer bust. He's been terrible looking at the stats, any of the recent stats, but he's been good in these majors. He's been good in terms of around the green game. He's going to be super low owned. Everyone hates him. So he stands out. I'm not have a lot of exposure. I'm more down into the next range, which I'm going to touch on here. I got a few guys here. I got a question from Randy on Kevin Na as we get into this sub 7K range. Not a lot of talk on him. The approach he stands out with, he hits a lot of fairways, which is nice to see. The majors, he's been very boom or bust. He hasn't been great at the PGA Championships, but very boom or bust in terms of his majors recently. 3 top 15s in his last 5 events, but 4 missed cuts in, going back to 2020 in those 2. Is there anything you like about Kevin Na? Because I do think he is going to be very low owned this week. He's above average around the green. I'm not going to talk anyone off him. There's nothing that really stands out to me why I wouldn't play him. But for me, I'm going down into that high 6K range, and a couple guys that I really like, Aaron Wise and Kevin Streelman. I'm just going to bring out my notes on those 2 here real quick. In terms of Aaron Wise, he gets a favorable tee time. He's been very good in the wind, 25th in this field in my win model. Difficult scoring conditions, he's 7th in that model. So that really stands out to me as something that can do him quite well here, as he's been good in these tougher tournaments. So just going to scroll over and have a look at his success at the PGA Championship. So he had a career best T17. He's improved every year at the PGA Championships. That is his only major. I think he's got that upside of a top 20 again, maybe even more there. So I like him a lot. Kevin Streelman is right there for me as well. Very consistent in the majors, top 20s in 3 straight majors, including that T8 at last year's PGA Championship. Good around the green. Not coming in with the greatest form, which scares me a little bit. And that's kind of why I lean Wise over Streelman in this range. But is there anyone starting with Na, with Randy's question there, in that high 6K range that you like? Are you with me with Streelman and Wise, or who are you liking kind of in this range?
Yeah, so if you look at Na's recent iron play, it's been very, very good. 6.8 on approach at Mexico, 4 on approach at the RBC Heritage, and then 14th at the Masters, which we don't have strokes gained for, but
he was top 10 in GIR.
Yeah, it had to be good. Lost 5 strokes putting at Mexico. The place that he struggled has been off the tee. That would be the only thing that worries me, but maybe his approach game and around the green is what sounds like is going to play well here. So I think he's definitely in play. Closing out that 7K range at the very bottom, Alex Noren and Brian Harmon interest me quite a bit, and they both do get that AM wave. But the 6K range does have a ton of options. Like you said, Robert McIntyre, 6,900, is actually my favorite down there. I would definitely lean Streelman here over Wise personally. But, Wise has been playing pretty well recently, so you could definitely go to him. But McIntyre and Na makes a lot of sense at the very top of that range.
Awesome. Now I have a favorite down in this range. He's not going to show up in any stats models because he is from the Euro Tour.
Oh, I know who it is. He's on my list too.
Sam Horsfield.
Yes.
So he was off for 4 months because of injury, so he doesn't really have a whole lot of form whatsoever, but he did return to the Euro Tour. He finished T21 and then won his very next start, which I don't think was last week. I think it was the week before, but it was just recently anyway. And over on the Euro Tour, he ranks 8th in stroke average, 8th in putting. I believe that's just putts per round. And then he's 22nd in sand saves as well. So he's been good around the green. He's a good putter. He's been scoring really well recently, and I don't think he's going to be very high owned. I know there's a lot of places that have wrote him up as a sleeper. I think Rob Bolton writes the sleeper column for PGAtour.com. I seen he was there. I seen him in a couple other places, but I really don't think he's a guy that's going to reach like 5-8%. I think that's maybe his max. So having like 2 or 3 of him in my 20 max is going to be more than the field. I'm definitely on board with him there just because of that and the all-around game. I always like finding 1 or 2 of these guys that are going to be low-owned that no one really knows about from the Euro Tour. It's usually something we look at a little bit more. I guess people research it a little bit more when we get to the Open versus the PGA Championship. So I just feel like we can maybe get some leverage there with him just because there is so many plays down in this range. Like if we go down even further, I think Adam Hadwin, just being that his price is sitting at, well, he's 200 to 1 odds to win in the range with guys that are 3,000 to 1, 600 to 1. He's in the range with guys that are PGA professionals in the field. Brandon Bingaman, who is 3,000 to 1 to win this tournament, is more expensive than Adam Hadwin this week, which just absolutely blows my mind when I seen that. Same with Lanto Griffin. I think he's going to take some ownership as well. As you can see with I'm looking at the wrong screen. Sorry about that. I will scroll down to Hadwin here. Looking at the DK and FanDuel price to differential, you can see that he's fairly priced. Both of them are usually, this is stuff that we see on FanDuel. They're mispricing. They're only +4s over on FanDuel versus DraftKings. They're +43 and +52. They're both going to take on ownership. I think this is maybe a spot that I've decided I might fade their ownerships. And I'm not saying they're going to be super high owned by any means, but I think they're going to be definitely highest owned down in this sub 7K range, or at least like the 6,500 range. So with that, I'm definitely considering fading them. I like Anirban Lahiri quite a bit this week, actually. He comes in playing some of the best golf of his career. He does have some success. We have to go back to like early days for him. He had a T5 at the PGA Championship, but he does have some success here. But what stood out to me the most, he's gaining 4+ strokes tee to green in 4 of his last 5 events coming in. Made the cut in 6 straight with 2 top 10s. One most recently at the Wells Fargo T6, gaining 2+ strokes and 3 straight around the green. And he's been putting, gaining 2+ strokes in 4 of his last 5. So he just checks a ton of boxes here outside of that PM/AM wave situation, but I think he's going to be like 2 to 5% owned. I'm going to have some of him as well. Mackenzie Hughes makes sense down here. He's really good around the green, a good putter. I mentioned Sam Horsfield. Keith Mitchell as a GPP, another low-owned guy that I don't think a lot of people will be thinking about. Looking at his odds to price and differential stand out there as well. So there's a ton of guys down in this range. I think if you're building out a 20 max, I think you're best at just like picking 5 or 6 of them, maybe 2 that you're favored on. Maybe getting 30% exposure to those 2 to 3 guys, and then maybe like 15 to 20% of those other 3 to 4 golfers that you maybe put in your player pool from this range. So if you're using an optimizer, it's definitely a great idea, is just kind of because you're going to need that if you're checking off boxes and using guys, let's say 85 and up. If you've got like 6 or 7 guys in that range, you're going to need probably the same amount of guys in that sub 7K range. And great thing with these majors, we got very soft pricing, which also does open up the opportunity of some spread out ownership. But I think just with some of the pricing this week, we're going to see some concentrated ownership on a few players. More specifically, Spieth and McIlroy at the top. And then, like I said, Lanto and Hadwin at the bottom. So if you want to start out and you want to, say you've built 15 lineups, what do I do with the last 5? Or however many lineups you're building, what do I do with these last ones? I build out all the narratives. I want to do something crazy. Fade Spieth and McIlroy, Lanto and Hadwin. You fade those 4 players right off the bat. Probably Cam Young too. I think he's looking like he's going to be a top 5 ownership play. Go scratch those off. Make 5 lineups without those 5, and those are going to be very leverage lineups for sure. It's going to be there's a lot of risk, I think, but it's going to give you a lot of leverage doing that. So we kind of touch plays. If there's no more questions here, do you have anyone? Yeah, what do you got here?
I got a few more guys for you down there. Not all the way at the bottom, but actually up in that upper 6K range. I think it's definitely my favorite spot. But Matt Kuchar, how about getting back on Cooch? The short game's always good. He's been playing much better since the start of April. Second at the Valero, third at RBC Heritage, 49th at Wells Fargo, and 12th at the Byron Nelson. Just
underpriced on all 3 sites.
Yeah, kind of checks all the boxes there. And then one that a couple guys that, I'm worried about getting some heavy exposure to because just kind of early on in their career, and you never know what those guys are gonna do in majors necessarily, especially the ones that are super tough scoring. But Davis Riley has looked very good since the start of May. I know he gained a ton of strokes putting at Mexico, but came back at the Byron Nelson and gained strokes everywhere in his game with a 9th place finish. So 2 straight top 10s for him. I think you could sprinkle in a little exposure on him. Mito, another guy that, again, don't want to get very, very heavy on just because of the lack of experience in majors, but has been very consistent. Last 4 starts on the PGA Tour. And then I think somebody mentioned him in chat earlier, Sebastian Munoz. been very, very consistent. We'll see what kind of upside he has in majors.
Yeah, if I was building more than, the lineups I am, Munoz would probably be like, I think I have, like I said, 6 or 7 players in the sub 7K range in my player pool at the moment. If I was building out more than my 20 lineups, getting into, say, the, 40, 50 lineup range, he would be probably like the next cut guy that would make the cut in that sub 7K range. Very close in there. Definitely top 10 down in that range for me. So someone that I would be looking at, like I told him, JB in chat there, I wouldn't talk anyone off Munoz for sure. He's been on a great run. It was just coming down to when it comes to my process of checking off boxes. He didn't check as many boxes as, say, Wise, Streelman, even Mito that you talked about there, Sam Horsfield, those guys. He just didn't check as many boxes. So that's kind of the reason why he didn't make my final cut in that sub 7K range. But that's where I sit down there for now. So there's a ton of options. So it really just, like I said before, it just comes down to narrowing your player pool down to, if you're building 20 lineups and you've got a player pool, even up to 20 players, and you have 6 or 7 in that upper range, you're going to want 6 or 7 kind of in that sub 7K range, play that stars and scrubs game. And then it really depends on how many scrubs or how many stars you want to get in there. So that kind of touches on that. Any parting words, any other bets that we haven't mentioned, anything at all?
I think that covers it for me.
Awesome, buddy. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. That kind of, if you have any questions, we're going to be tracking the weather, checking it again here in about probably 2 hours. We're going to be building for the next 2 to 3 hours for sure. Oh, we got Bob here. How would you play the 3 max for this tournament? Still recommend using 3 golfers as a core and fill in the rest. Yeah, so you've got Scheffler, Matsuyama, and Lowry. I mean, I've got no problem locking those 3 in. It's just, again, it comes down to your risk management. Are you willing to risk? If you're only playing 3 lineups this week, it's the same as playing 1 if you're kind of all in on those 3, because if one of them goes, all of your lineups will go. So it's really up to you. If you feel like risking it and you want to go for the absolute win, if those 3 players, if you're very, very confident in all of those 3, definitely. With your other, your fill-in players with the rest of your lineup, I don't even know. I would probably keep your player pool fairly small and not try and use, say, 3 players twice out of those 3 lineups, if you know what I'm saying there. But another option would just be using, pairing 2 of them together, pairing 2 other ones together. It's really, again, on your risk management. Dane, how would you play that for 3 max? I know you play maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't know if I would lock all 3 in for all 3 lineups, but I definitely would play at least 2 in every lineup. So maybe you have one lineup that has all 3. Let's see, the other one that had 2. If you're confident in one of the 3 more than others, then yeah, lock one of them in, mix and match the other 2 around them in the other 2 lineups that you're not playing all 3 together.
Scheffler, Mats, and then Scheffler, Lowry. And then if Scheffler's your top guy that you're feeling is going to win, Scheffler, Mats, Scheffler, Lowry. And then maybe you could go 1 with all 3 of them. That's the way I would do it, is kind of rank the 3 of them, have 1 in all 3 lineups, and then mix in the other 2, just kind of like we said. There's how I would go about it. But yeah, that kind of covers everything here. Stick to chat. If you have any more questions, great. Make sure to hit that like button below. Share with your friends. I appreciate it. We're going to share the ownership percentage tomorrow morning, and we're going to be doing some updates going into round 2, 3, and 4 in terms of showdown. We'll report on that weather again tomorrow. We talked about, just as a reminder, we did talk about, if you are playing showdown, look at those afternoon waves, concentrating on players for them, because those wind gusts both mornings, a little bit heavier on Friday morning for that wind separation, possible wave differential there. Thanks for tuning in, and hopefully see everybody in winning picks on Sunday night. Good luck, everyone.